All right, in this video, we're going to go ahead and find the inverse of a rational function. So let's say we have g of x equals 5x plus 3 divided by 2x minus 1. Now, the very first thing that we want to do is replace this g of x with a y. So if we have something like g of x or f of x or h of x or whatever, let's go ahead and write y instead. So we'll say y equals 5x plus 3 divided by 2x minus 1. Just going to make things simpler as we go along, and it's just going to help us sort of have a standard procedure to follow for problems like this. So now the very next thing that we want to do, for pretty much the same reason, so that we can have a standard process to follow, let's go ahead and swap the x's and y's. So wherever we see a y, replace it with an x. Wherever we see x, replace it with y. So this then becomes x equals 5y plus 3 divided by 2y minus 1. Now, why do we do that? Well, now what we want to do is just solve for y, and then once we solve for y, that's our inverse function, okay? So the original function is up here, g of x equals 5x plus 3 over 2x minus 1. Now, if we replace g of x with y, and then swap the x's and y's, all we have to do is solve for y, and that gives us our inverse function, okay? So the very first thing then, or the very next thing, I guess, that we need to do is multiply both sides by 2y minus 1. So that's going to give us x times the quantity 2y minus 1 equals 5y plus 3. Okay, so if we multiply both sides of this equation here by 2y minus 1, we get x times the quantity 2y minus 1 equals 5y plus 3. Now, the next thing that we have to do is distribute the x. So x times 2y gives us 2xy, and then minus 1 times x gives us minus x. And then that equals 5y plus 3. Okay, now we're going to come up here and continue. Okay, now what we want to do is get all the y's on one side and everything else without a y on the other side. So first, let's go ahead and subtract 5y from both sides. So this is 2xy minus x, and then minus 5y equals, the only thing we have left on the right side is that positive 3, so just 3 here. Now, here's something with a y, here's something without a y, something with a y. So let's go ahead and add x to both sides. So that's going to give us everything with a y on the left side, everything without a y on the right side. So add x to both sides, and we get 2xy minus 5y equals x plus 3. Okay, or 3 plus x if you so prefer. But anyway, now this is good news. Why is that good news? Because everything with a y is on the left side, everything without a y is on the right side. And now we want to solve for y, right? So all we have to do now is factor y out of the left-hand side. So if we factor y, what's left over? Or what do we get? Well, here's 2xy. If we factor out a y, what's left over is 2x. Here's minus 5y. If we pull out a y, what we get left over is minus 5. And then we still just have x plus 3 over here. Now, pretty much the last step is divide both sides by 2x minus 5, and we end up with y equals x plus 3 on top, and then divided by 2x minus 5. Okay, and that's pretty much it. That's the final answer. Now, since we started with g of x, technically what we should do is end with g inverse of x using the inverse notation. So our final answer might have to be g inverse of x equals, and then x plus 3 over 2x minus 5. Okay, so that's goofy looking x over there. Now, this is just that fancy little inverse notation here. If you're not sure what that is, or if you're following along in a course where you haven't covered that yet, don't really worry about it. The main point here is just if you start with g of x, blah, 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 replace that with a y, then swap your x's and y's, and then solve for y. So just to recap what we did for this type of function here, you first want to multiply both sides by the denominator, and then distribute your x's, which will just the one x here, distribute the x, and then get everything with a y on one side, everything without a y on the other side. Then on the side that has the y, factor the y out, and then divide by what's left over. And then you end up with y equals some mess here, and this here is your inverse function. So again, g inverse of x equals x plus 3 divided by 2x minus 5. That's the inverse function of this function here.